This video is brought to you by Miniature Market. Thousands of board games, miniatures, and paints, discount prices at miniaturemarket.com.
Hello everybody. Well, today we're going to talk about something that kind of ensued due to a discussion between me and the Queen, which basically means argument, you know what I mean? But we were out here and we were looking around, and she goes, "Why do you need so many games?" And I go, "Well, why do you need so many holiday decorations? Or why do you go shopping the day after Christmas for the next Christmas?" Okay, and then it takes up more space where I can't grow my hobby and things that I do. And the question was, do you really need all these games? Do you really need all this? And don't you just need a few games, maybe from... why do you need 500 war games? Why can't you just have one or two? Well, as the discussion ensued, it made me think, what would I pick and what would I keep if I had to get rid of everything and had to keep under 10 games? And I broke it into sections, more or less, okay, and kind of went over all the things that I felt that out of all the games I had to look at, basically war games, sport games, miniature games, and things like that. What would I keep out of each of those? And could I come up with an under 10 game list out of 3,000 games that I have? So I started working on that, and I thought that it would be kind of neat to give you what I would keep out of everything here if I had to get rid of everything, if everything had to go and I was only able to have one little shelf there. What would the games be that I keep? Now, they wouldn't be real games. It would be games basically that I felt that were going to scratch an itch when I wanted to play something. So we're going to start with war games. And I started compiling this list. And I started thinking, well, Panzer Blitz, of course, you have to keep Panzer Blitz. But that's not the case, because how many times can you play Panzer Blitz? 1,000,000 times. But it's the same type of thing. So I started thinking on grander scale. If I had to keep one war game. And a couple of things that came to me were World at War, and Second Front from the Europa series, because it covered such a wide spectrum. I also started thinking about coin games and some of the things that I really love, like old school tactical and things like that. And when it came down to it, I ended up keeping Second Front, Europa Second Front. A very old game, out of print. It is a master's edition, and you would have to be a very advanced wargamer to play it, but you could play it in very small sections and things like that. That's the thing I always loved about Second Front, is how much you could break it down into battles and things like that. It does a lot. Would it be on anybody else's list? Probably not, but for me, Second Front would be the one I'd keep out of the war games. I then went to sports games, and I started thinking about Thunder Alley, Pitch Car, which I consider a sports game, Blood Bowl, also Sabutio. So that was even harder because of my love for Blood Bowl, one of my all-time favorite games. But of course, Sabutio, which is probably, such a historic and great and fun and visual game, I ended up keeping Sabutio. So now we've got two. Okay, in our sports category, we have Sabutio. In our war category, we have Second Front. And then I kind of started moving over to different things, okay, such as dungeon crawls. Now this, the heart of my collection is a ton of dungeon crawls. And when you think of Warhammer Quest, Dungeon Saga, Dungeon Universalis, oh god, I mean, I have so many. Altar Quest, which is newer into the entry, and a ton of different things that I have. I started thinking, what is the most complete and something that I wouldn't get tired of? Swords and Sorcery, I also included in there. But it's one-dimensional and it has just one story. And once you play it, the replayability doesn't fade, but it's still good. Gloomhaven, you could play that for forever if you want to call that a dungeon crawl. But for me, it came down to Warhammer Quest. And believe it or not, Dungeon Universalis. Now, as I've grown and keep on learning this game, and with the new Kickstarter that just happened, which I'm hoping that they fix a lot of things, I'm really looking forward to this. I also thought about Dungeon Crusade, but let's figure it out. Dungeon Crusade, I haven't had a chance to get on the table, and Altar Quest, new, I don't think it could qualify for this entry. And there were other ones out there too that, I mean, let's not escape. There's, Shadows of Brimstone and stuff like that, which is just massive. But when it came down to it, I went with Dungeon Universalis. And it's because of what the capabilities and what the promise and the beauty and everything that this game has to offer and can be. And I just think I had more flexibility, more growth that I can have with it. And Dungeon Universalis so far would be the dungeon crawl game I take. Believe it or not. Okay, so now we have three. We have Second Front. We have Blood Bowl. Sabutio. And Dungeon Universalis. That's three. Okay. Then I thought of general board games. When you start thinking general board games, you start thinking games like Everdale, Eon's End, Defense Grid, which I love. Just looking around here, I can throw games out. Big Trouble in Little China, another great game. One Small Step. Games that are just Caverna, The Colonist, all games of all kinds of different ilks, but just a generalized board game. And for me, when I started sorting through and thinking of things, really two stood out that I think I would have a hard time not having, and that was Hoplomachus from Chip Theory Games, as well as Too Many Bones. I really love my Too Many Bones and everything that goes with it, and how the flexibility and how much I love the battle system and the story, and how many times I can play it over and over and over again. With all the different components, and of course that massive trove chest, which is just glorious. And when it finally came down to it, it came down to Too Many Bones. It's in my top 5. It has to stay. There's just no way I can part with that. And that's the way I really felt about that. And it was so hard because there were just so many things. Defenders of the Crown, Mage Knight was in there. Just so many games I love and have such a passion for. How do you separate that? So now we have a war game, which is Second Front. We have our sports game, which is Sabutio. We have our dungeon crawl, which is Dungeon Universalis. We have our generalized board game category, which is Too Many Bones. And then it came to one of the ones that I said I would never choose between these two games. And I added a print and play section there, and I said, what print and play game would I keep? And out of all the print and plays I have, and I've got tons and tons and tons that you've seen that I've binded and categorized, and if I was only able to keep one of those to add to our list here, it comes down to D100 Dungeon and, of course, 4 Against Darkness. And this is one that I rip at the gut with, because anytime anybody asks me online or anything like that, which one would you choose? Which one would you choose? And I just say I can't. I don't have to, because I love both Andrea and Mr. Knight. Both of them I had conversations with. Both of them, they know how much I love the game. They've been very supportive of the channel. And I hate picking between each game. That both games have been featured beyond belief on this channel. And I had to pick one. And for me, I think it's the one when I looked back at how many playthroughs, how many different adventures I can go on, even though you can do so much with D100. I ended up going with 4 Against Darkness. Because of all the supplements and everything that it does. And, I love 4 Against Mars, and I had to leave that out. Because remember, you only can take one and all its supplements. So I went with 4 Against Darkness because, number one, my passion and love for the game, and the endless quests that you can go on with your characters. And I just felt, for me, it was 4 Against Darkness. So now we're at 5. Okay? 4 Against Darkness, Dungeon Universalis, Subudio, Second Front, and Too Many Bones. Which leads us to, if I had to pick and add to my collection a miniature game, a miniature board game, not a miniature game, because we're going to save that for our wild card. Okay, because this will bring us 6, and then I'm going to give myself 2 wild cards. Keeps me under 10, okay, well under 10. But I thought that would take some pressure off. Well, it really didn't. Because when I started thinking about miniature board games, I started thinking about Terminators, Genesis, Fall of Skynet, which I love, Zombicide, which I love, Ninja Mutant Turtles, all these games with all kinds of different miniatures, Space Hulk, Blood Bowl I included in there, Doom, and all these just Necromunda. I can go on and on and on, and all these miniature games, Reichbusters, Nemesis, even, and I'm sitting there and I'm going, okay, what do you take with me? And it came down to Space Hulk versus Blood Bowl, which got a second life in this whole mix here. So when it finally came down to it, I ended up taking Blood Bowl, as it's in my top 5 and one of my favorite games of all time, along with Space Hulk. The difficulty was the flexibility that I have with Blood Bowl and how much I love that game. And though I love Space Hulk, it's kind of limited right now. Now, can you homebrew stuff and stuff like that? Well, that means I would have to keep extra stuff, and I couldn't do that. I have to limit it to what I have and what is attached to it. And when it really came down to it, I went with Blood Bowl. So now we're at 6. Then I gave myself a wild card category. And this was open to any kind of war game, old school tactical, which, I love that entire system. Eon's End, another game that I absolutely adore. Mage Knight, a life into that. Merchants of Venus, a game I really do have a tremendous passion for. Star Saga, Death in Dark, Talon, Silent Death. You know, all these games started popping up in my head, and even as I look around here, I sit here and I'm scratching my head. How do you choose two out of all of that? But a couple really stood out, and again, Space Hulk, Kingdom Death Monster, which I have a lot of passion for, Old School Tactical, Medaria, which I love, and we need to get back into, and when I really Mage Knight, which was the other one. So I kind of sat there and I mulled and I said, if I got to take something out of these, one of them's got to be Mage Knight, because of how much I love the way that game plays, everything about it, how complicated it is at times, and yet how random it could be, and the way things work with it. It's a game that is one of my older games, not oldest, because God, I've been in this for 30 years. But after the renaissance of board gaming, this was one of the games that stood out and still stands strong and sits very strongly on those shelves. So Mage Knight, which brings us up to 7. And the last one, when I really thought about it, and I had to go with it because of just everything that goes with it, I said, if I've got to have something, I've got to go with Kingdom Death Monster. And I really pondered Kingdom Death Monster, folklore, but at the end of the day, Kingdom Death Monster was the one that kind of just stood out because of how different and unique and all the things that go with that tremendous experience of playing that game. So there you go. Now, the funny thing about it is when I compared it to my top 100 list, how many of these were in the top 10? Well, not many. But when I had to generalize and look at my collection as a whole, I had to kind of figure out what, if I had one shelf, if I had things that I had to go back to and play and do and work with, what would be the things that would stand out? And these 8 are mine. Now, a lot of weird choices for me. Okay? And some of you are scratching your head. That's okay. That's my list. It doesn't mean anything. What matters to me is, what would you do? What would you do if you had to keep under 10 games and break them down into categories? And what would you take with you? What would you keep as your wife is having everything carted out of your home? I know, it's a nightmare situation. But if you had to do this, what would you do? I would love to see your thoughts. I would love to hear from our most awesome community in the world what you guys would do and how you would do it in our comments. I would love to hear from you. I would love to see it, and I would love to respond to it. So if you can, just leave a like, subscribe, and leave a comment, and let me know what your thoughts are on this very unusual subject. So until next time, it's your old pal Rob. We'll see you soon.